In the first lesson, it seems that Jeremiah was giving the benefit of the doubt to people who were trying to bring him down. They were nice to him to his face, but behind his back, they were working to hurt him. And his reaction may be very much like ours would be, but not very Christian. James wants us to seek the wisdom from above, which is pure and gentle, peaceable and willing to yield, full of mercy and good deeds. Submit yourself to God, he says. Draw near to him, and he will draw near to you. And then Jesus wants his disciples to focus on serving rather than status. If you want to be first, then be last, and the servant of all. So, being blindsided by people that you thought were your friends, and a normal reaction which is not to be followed. That's part one. Seeking the wisdom from above that shows itself in gentleness and a good life. That's number two. And then Jesus says, seeking to serve others rather than places of honor is what we should strive for. Starting with Jeremiah. He had some people in his life who he thought were his friends. He never questioned their loyalty or anything that they were doing. Then he says, God somehow opened my eyes to the truth that they were working behind me to bring me down. Nice to his face, but plotting behind his back to hurt him in various ways. I can relate to this story. I watched a guy at Bethesda Lutheran Church try to bring down the pastor that I loved. To Pastor Oppel's face, the guy acted like he was his best friend. But behind the scenes, this man would say cruel and hurtful things. Luckily, Pastor Oppel was not brought down in spite of this guy's best efforts. Now, the symbol for the behavior of that particular man is a clenched fist inside a velvet glove, or a wolf in sheep's clothing. Now, to be blindsided like that is so hurtful that we have this story in the Bible. It happens, maybe it has happened to you, and it is awful. I had a woman in my church downstate who was determined to find something out about me that was bad so she could keep other people from liking me so much. I had no idea. She came into my office for counseling with a smile on her face. I got her kids out of a lot of trouble that they seemed to get into. I spent hours with her family trying to keep the marriage together. And then somehow I got a hint that this woman was not my friend. I remained gracious to her, but the pain of that betrayal almost made me cry. I was like a lamb being led to the slaughter. Innocently treating an evil or a person with evil intentions with gentleness and kindness. When Jeremiah found out who they were and what they were up to, he thanked God for opening his eyes. But then he does something that we're not supposed to do. He asks God to punish them severely. God, let me see your retribution on them. Go get them. A normal response, but not the kind we are taught by Jesus. It is one of life's most hurtful moments when all along you think you are good with someone and then found out that they really don't like you. Or worse, that they are doing and saying things to bring you down. Now, asking God to go get them is normal. But a better response is to just be aware and stay out of their way and shake the dust off your sandals and move on. You can be absolutely, completely innocent, and this kind of thing can happen. And I don't think I'm alone. Am I? I call that particular activity the Hannah syndrome. You know why? I saw a movie called Hannah and Her Sisters. Hannah was a woman who was so good and so wonderful, her sisters hated her. She was always pleasant. She was always kind. She was always clean. Her house was always clean. She was always doing things for others. And she had nice kids. And because she was so good, behind her back, her sisters tried to hurt her. This story really touches a nerve with me. But the most important part is the response. Not to hate, not to try to hurt back, just be aware and move on. Then we get to James. He gives us some encouragement to do that. Show by your good life that your works are done with gentleness, born of wisdom from above. And he describes what wisdom from above produces. It is pure, he says. It is peaceable, gentle, willing to yield, another way of saying compromise, full of mercy and without partiality. When we act with that kind of stuff in our hearts, be assured that we are on the right track. We are on the track that God wants us to be on. And James goes on to say, submit yourselves to God. You know, my picture of God is Jesus. But when the word God gets tossed around, sometimes I can't figure out which picture I should put in my mind. And so when I hear the word G-O-D, God, I simply substitute the word life. Remember when Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life? Jesus said, sort of, I am life. Maybe God could say that too. I am life. One of my favorite minister friends, I heard this week, is now on hospice. Janet and I saw he and his wife last fall when we were on our way out west. He says he doesn't have much pain and he's ready for whatever comes. But I could hear his submission to God in his voice when I talked to him this week. It sounds so easy. Submit yourself to God. But it's not always easy to do that. However, James is right. We should. And a line that I have always liked seems to fit right here. If you're not as close to God as you used to be, guess who moved? Finally, Jesus. He finds out what his friends are talking about, which was, which of them is the greatest? That scene reminds me of times that I have taught and I have preached, I thought, with great eloquence and effectiveness, that we need to be restrained and turn the other cheek, and then walk out of the sanctuary into the fellowship hall and see two people in the church arguing about something that makes very little sense. Do you not get it? I mean, I just spent 20 minutes talking about this. And here you are, going about things like you never heard a thing. That's frustrating for pastors. You heard the story about the pastor who came to the church in his first sermon. He preached about love and how we should treat our neighbors. And the next week came and he preached the same sermon. And the people thought, well, maybe he was busy this week getting acquainted with everybody and didn't have time to prepare. The third week they come and he hears the same sermon again. He preaches the same sermon again. They say, Pastor, when are you going to change your sermon? He says, when you start doing what I'm telling you. Hey, you guys, Jesus said, do you still not get it? If you want to be first in my kingdom, make yourself the last and servant of all. For the first will be last, and the last will be first. You know, Pope Francis is trying to inject the Jesus style into the Catholic Church, and it just thrills me. Humble, kind, loving all kinds of different people. And then Jesus focuses on a child like we read this morning. And he instructs his disciples on how welcoming we should be to children. So, that being first makes you servant of all is hard on some people, especially the ones who like being served. I've never been on an all-inclusive trip. Never been. I'm lucky to have married a woman that has the same chip that I got. We always pay more attention to the servants than we do to the ones being served. I like that we have that affinity with the servants than the ones being served. We see the servants as our peeps. You know what I mean. So let me review. From Jeremiah, how sad it is that someone you didn't expect is hurting you behind your back. But when you can become aware, you stay out of their way and move on. From James, seek wisdom from above, which is pure and peaceable, gentle and willing to yield, full of mercy and good deeds. And I think this is one of the most blunt things that Jesus ever said. You want to be first in this kingdom? Strive to be the servant of all.